Hey everyone, LiveLock here, and I've been playing Enhancement Shaman this patch up until like the 21, 22 key level. I've been on YouTube for 8 months or so. I've originally played tanks mostly. This patch I've switched over, and last patch I switched over to Shadow Priest and Enhancement Shaman. I've done decent so far. I'm liking the builds. I get a lot of questions about the best way of doing um, our rotation in medium-sized and large-sized pulls, especially large-sized pulls. So I'll go over the current set of talents, gear choices, and legendaries that are viable. It'll be probably 4 sections. It'll be a section for Primal Lava Actuators as Necrolord, Skybreaker's Fiery Demise as Venthyr, Witch Doctor Wolfbones as Night Fae, and an honorable mention to Doomwinds as Venthyr, even though I don't recommend actually running Doomwinds in the current state that Enhancement Shaman is in. Enhancement Shaman is in a very good place right now. It has a lot of flexible builds. The playstyle itself is very flexible. You can do funnel, you can do decent AoE, not great AoE, not uncapped AoE. You can do really good single target if you spec for it. You can do decent single target if you don't spec for it. So we're pretty flexible right now. I think we're really feeling like a funnel niche. The rotation is actually really fun. It's very refreshing not having to rely completely on damage cooldowns to actually do all of your damage. But I'll go through all these details in the upcoming sections. The first build we'll talk about is Primal Lava Actuators. I've crafted them on my hands for no particular reason. I think I just wanted the eye level boost. I probably had bad hands or something at the time. But the legendary works by taking each of your Flame Shock ticks and rolling them into your next Lava Lash. So we'll go over more details when we're doing rotation, but the whole idea behind this is you want as many Flame Shocks as you can, up until 6, because we're target capped at 6 Flame Shocks. And then you have the option of either spreading out your Lava Lashes to spread out your Lashing Flames debuff, which we'll go over when we get the talents, or you can just channel those Lava Lashes, those like buffed up Lava Lashes, into one single target and do your funnel. Funnel is something you're really good at. Funnel just means like, if you add 2 more mobs to a pull, it means you can actually do more damage to a priority target. So think something like the Shard of Halkeus on Halls of Atonement, right? Like they're surrounded by 4 little guys, and the fact that they're surrounded by 4 little guys means that you can do more damage to the Shard, so you can actually kill the Shard faster than if you were just fighting the Shard alone. So that's the goal. The goal is many Flame Shocks and many Lava Lashes. There's some dungeons where it's better than others. Like Mists is very good because every single pull almost is like 6 and below. So that means that you're getting max value out of your Flame Shocks. We'll go over some of the talents next. This is pretty nice actually, because while Enhancement Shaman does have a lot of flexibility in terms of what it can do, realistically, you'll probably just be running like these talents all the time. I've done lots of experiments as well. Like there are some niche scenarios where other things can work, but even in those scenarios, this build is actually like probably, if not best, very close to best. And this is the only build where you can actually do funnel, and funnel is like very, very valuable to have in Mythic Plus. So first row, Lashing Flames, very important. You're doing basically Lava Lashes. Lava Lashes is like your whole life with this build. So the more you Lava Lash, the more benefit you get. Like you don't want to have to do other things like, spend Maelstrom on like single target attacks, right? That's what Elemental Blast is doing. This is like more of a raid talent. It takes Maelstrom and it does like single target damage. Lava Lash fits into your rotation perfectly. We're already very global constrained, and it buffs up our second highest damage overall, which is Flame Shock, right? So Lava Lash and Flame Shock, this is what you can expect in your runs. Lava Lash, Flame Shock, and Fire Nova are going to like almost always be your top damage for all of your runs. Forceful Winds, you will not take with this build ever. You will basically only take this with another build we'll talk about for Doomwinds, but Doomwinds isn't doing very well right now. One note though on Elemental Blast, like so you might think to yourself that on a tyrannical week you might try to make this work, but I've found as Necrolord at least that trying this is pretty awkward because the Primordial Wave ability that we have requires that we spend Maelstrom too. So you might find yourself in this position where like both Elemental Blast and Primordial Wave are off cooldown, but you have only 5 Maelstrom. which means you have to choose which one of them to do first, and one of them will end up like losing uptime. So we don't have like a ton of Maelstrom in this build. It's more of like a Lava Lash build. So I would stick away from Elemental Blast in like pretty much all cases, because honestly, like Lashing Flames, even single target, is pretty competitive with Elemental Blast. It's not better, but it's good enough. And the opportunity cost would be pretty big if you were to go over there. For the second row, we do Hot Hands. Hot Hands is a no-brainer. You get more Lava Lashes, right? So that's it. That's as far as we have to go for it. Storm Flurry, it could be used in some niche scenarios. Not with this build really, but with Forset, like you might feel compelled to go with it. But basically with this build, there's no chance you would never take like more Lava Lashes. I think Ice Strike is kind of a dead talent right now in all builds, to be honest. Next one is up to you. I usually take Spirit Wolf. I haven't tried Earth Shield yet, but it doesn't seem like a lot of healing. You might end up wanting Static Charge in some cases. It kind of depends on your group comp. For us, we have a lot of AoE stuns already, so like I often don't even use Cap Totem because we end up getting stun DR. So for me, it makes no sense, but for you, it could. It might actually. But Spirit Wolf is nice because you get a big DR. So like this is great on something like Sanguine Depths, like the third boss where you're running around in Ghost Wolf anyway to get orbs, like another 20% DR. Like there are lots of places where this ends up being really nice. The next row is usually Fire Nova. Fire Nova is the only source of like semi-uncapped AoE damage that we have. We're pretty much hard capped to 6. Our Crash Lightning is uncapped, but it does like very, very little damage. Hailstorm is an AoE option, but it's capped at 5 targets. Fire Nova, technically capped at 6 targets, but every target explodes and damages targets around it, so it will scale somewhat up to higher pulls. And as you can tell from the overall, it's like our third highest ability, right, along with Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning. So it does a lot of damage. It's worth doing. You might consider going Hailstorm on something like maybe a Spires or maybe a Mists if you really, really needed like the extra single target damage, because the way that Hailstorm works is it'll buff like every 5 Maelstrom you spend will buff your next Frost Shock. So you'll often have like 10k Frost Shocks, and as opposed to Fire Nova where every individual Fire Nova hits for like 3k or so, but because it hits so many people, it does a lot more. So if you really need the extra single target, but it's like a couple of hundred DPS more single target than Fire Nova would have been. So big opportunity cost. It could work out nicely if you were running like certain conduits, but I'd say don't go with it for this build. Next one is technically your choice as well. I think Windrush is probably the selfless option, but there aren't that many cases where like my group has really needed it, so I don't really consider that. I love Feral Lunge because like we don't have great movement outside of like turning into a dog and stacking our Spirit Walk with dog. So this gets us like through puddles and across like gaps that we have to close. It comes in really handy in like a lot of weird spots. It's not a great charge. It's like pretty limited in terms of like range, min and max range, but it lets you charge, so it's decent. Nature's Guardian is like the default safe choice, but I found that whenever I died, I get one shot. So like if I just do something dumb like step into a frontal, I'm dead within one shot anyway. So this didn't really end up saving me very much. The next one is always Sundering for every build, no matter what. Sundering is uncapped damage at you just like, you press it whenever it's up. It's kind of awkward because it's like a slight delay. Like you can see, like I press it now. Oops, can't do it while moving. But yes I can. Yeah, see? Like I moved and it was there at the end. It's weird. It's kind of like tricky to get it just right. Like sometimes you'll press it and things move, but there's really no other option here, unfortunately. Like this, the Crashing Storm doesn't do it anywhere near enough damage, and Stormkeeper like doesn't really make sense for our build. Like it doesn't make sense for any of our builds really. It's just like a little bit lightning damage, but for us, Chain Lightning only hits 3 targets, so it's like it's nothing like it is for Ellie. And the last one is always going to be Elemental Spirits right now. I think maybe you can go Ascendance with like some weird Doomwinds build, but it probably won't see much play. I think every single build for PLA, I think every single build in general, regardless of Legendary, will probably be Elemental Spirits because of our tier set. Even without tier set, it's like it's good enough that you can just like take it and not worry about, min-maxing Ascendance until you have tier or something like that. So that's our talents. Pretty simple. You almost never change them in any dungeon, which is nice. Moving on to conduits and soulbinds. I prefer to do Merilith basically all the time. I know the guides right now, like Wowhead and Icy Veins, I think, will say Bonesmith. I really don't understand why they say Bonesmith. Like it's not great to me. To me, our strength is funnel and AoE damage, and a lot of our damage is done through Lava Lash. So if you're going to think about comparing the different options you have on this tree, like okay, what does Bonesmith offer? Bonesmith offers a stat buff, which is good. That's fine for everybody. It offers execute damage under 35%. So you could justify that somehow with maybe, Tyran weeks. I think Tyran bosses don't live that long to actually make that worth it, but that's like one thing that it has going for it. Carver's Eye is the big thing. Carver's Eye will give you a pretty large mastery buff for the first 10 seconds of every pull. And if you really min-max this, like you can like save one target for, when Carver's Eye is falling off and refresh it at 5 stacks and get even more of it. But it's very hard to do. So if you're not prepared to like, really, really min-max Carver's Eye, I think the longer a fight is, the more Carver's Eye will lose out to Merilith. Although it is a good buff. Mastery is really good for us. It affects basically all of our magic damage, our Lava Lash and everything else. Lava Lash, Fire Nova, everything that's like not physical. Well, Mastery will buff. And then we have like some weird things over here. Now, some classes love Bonesmith, like Shadow Priest, because of this talent, Marrowed Gemstone. Marrowed Gemstone, yeah, that's how you say it. The big crit buff, basically, every minute. Now, Shadow Priest likes that because you have large cooldowns. So this can line up with your cooldowns and make them even larger. We don't have large cooldowns like that. We have some cooldowns, but they're not anywhere near as large as like a Shadow Priest or like any other cooldown, like an Arcane Mage, for example. Like that's not our damage profile. Our damage profile is like very steady. So this isn't great for us. And our potency conduits are very good. So I prefer Merilith for all those reasons. Merilith has some nice things it gives you. Merilith gives you some defensive benefits. You get like a shield if you get hit too much. You get a stagger DR above 80%, which is very nice. The big thing it gives you is Kevin Zoozling, which is a 6% damage buff for 15 seconds. So if you're ever responsible for doing like big priority damage, you can throw your Primordial Wave onto some target and then just like pump Lava Lashes in, and it'll do 6% more damage. And these are like, Lava Lash is big. Like with 5 targets and a priority target, like you're Lava Lashing for like 30k sometimes. Like it's a big difference. The ultimate form gives you some CC, and there's a lot of cool things you can do with ultimate form. Like the Lich boss in Theater of Pain, if you use Fleshcraft while he's targeting you for like that hands mechanic, then you won't actually have to do the hands mechanic. Like it kind of negates that entire mechanic. There's a lot of like weird little things like that you can do on various bosses. And the other thing it gives you is just what is this? Oh yeah, just like reduced time or more CDR on your Fleshcraft. So that, and you get like a random buff, like depending on like the corpse that you walk over. You always get this one, which is Mastery, which is nice. Like you get 120 constant Mastery basically all the time, as long as you use Fleshcraft and cooldown. You don't have to do all Fleshcraft, just like trigger Fleshcraft and you can cancel it. You get the cooldown. You get the Mastery buff either way. You can't really plan around other things. Like it's just nice to have. Like if you walk over like a dead beast body, I think you get something else. You can look it up on Wowhead. You don't really care too much about those things. Like some of them are good, some of them aren't, but they're just nice to have. I think overall, Merilith is like the most balanced tree for Necrolord. I think no one really considers Emily either. It has like some like, hey, I haven't even like unlocked Emily's tree. It's like it's not great compared to the other two. You get like you get to buff your allies, and you get some damage if you fully channel your Fleshcraft, which I almost never do because like we're always going very fast in Mythic Plus, so you often don't have time to do it. But that's the conduits and the soulbinds. You'll basically always be doing this no matter what if you're PLA. So you don't have to worry too much about like min-maxing things. Oh, I guess I'll go over the conduits. I didn't do the conduits yet. Conduits are always Magma Fist, gives you more crit on your Lava Lash, which is nice because like our whole life is Lava Lash right now. And now when you're pumping Lava Lashes into a target, like, you'll have 30% extra chance. So like basically with my crit, it's like around 20 or something. My crit's not very good, but it's almost like a 50-50 like percent chance, like whether or not you crit the target. I always do for the defense conduits. I always do the refreshing waters one because I do heal myself a good amount. It's like it's basically our defense, right? Like we only have one defensive ability, Astral Shift. So this ends up getting used somewhat often. You can, I guess, go with this if you want, the Condensed Animosphere for a more passive approach, but I actually prefer, having the option to top myself pretty easily if I have to. It comes in handy at the end of like a tyrannical boss fight where everyone's dead and you have to just live a little bit longer. This thing wouldn't keep you up. The next potency conduit is Primordial Wave. This is really good. It's basically RNG. It'll reset our Primordial Wave conduit, our Primordial Wave ability after we actually consume the buff. I'll go over what Primordial Wave does at the rotation end of it, but it's nice. Like it's 1 in 3 chance basically of getting another Primordial Wave, which is not bad. It is a very good ability. The next is Vital Accretions. I prefer this one. Whenever you summon out your Earth Elemental, you get a ton of extra health. So I've got like 90k health around there whenever I summon my Earth Elemental. It's very handy. It keeps you up through some like one-shot abilities or things that would have been one-shot abilities. I'll dismiss him. The next one is also very important. Another good potency conduit is Focus Lightning. Maelstrom Weapon increases the damage and healing of your next spell by 10% per Maelstrom. So that's like 50%, right? That's a very large buff if you only spend spells when you have 5 Maelstrom, which is what you do. You never spend like 3 Maelstrom. There's like a few scenarios where you might spend a little bit of Maelstrom, but this really buffs like, you get 50% to your healing, 50% to your Train Lightning and your Thunder, your Lightning Bolt damage. Very good. And this one, pretty much up to you. I like to take the Ghost Wolf movement speed increase just because like I like to go faster. But I mean, what options do we have? You can take a 10% CDR on Tremor and Earthbind if you want that for some reason. I told you why I don't, because we have too many stuns already. This Hex thing maybe could be nice on mists. If the Hex gets broken, maybe the dog will have a minuscule DR. This probably is more of a PvP thing, if I had to guess. And this Bloodlust one is like really weird. Like every time you get Bloodlust, you get Spirit Walk. So that's like a movement speed increase. And you have like 2 to 3 Bloodlusts usually in a dungeon. So that's not getting a lot of value. There's not really many options, in my opinion, for finesse. So that is all of the conduits and build stuff. The next thing that we'll do is we'll head over to target dummies and we'll do some rotation walkthroughs and ability explanations. So here we are in Zuldazar. If you don't know, this is probably the best spot to do the training dummy work. If you go out of the front of Zuldazar and you go down here on the bottom, you can get to a 4-stack target dummy right here. And it's not great, but it's the best you have if you're doing anything with Necrolord, unfortunately. I don't know why, but Necrolord just has only pairs of target dummies, so you can't do AoE. So every Covenant gets AoE except for Necrolord for some reason, even though they are the Warrior Covenant. Okay, we are PLA, right? So let's go over quickly. I'll clear out this old damage. What the rotation feels like when you're in a pull. So every single pull, no matter what you're doing, the first thing you're going to be doing is dropping your Wind Fury Totem. This thing just gives you the chance to actually duplicate your main hand abilities. It doesn't actually do a lot of damage, but what it does do is like you'll get lucky sometimes with a proc on this thing, and you'll get like you'll be flooded with Maelstrom. And Maelstrom is nice because you need it sometimes to, kill people. So it's not really a damaging thing for you. For other classes, it definitely is. like for warriors, like they love having this thing. So you definitely want to make sure it's down when you have other people in your group. But for us, it's really like a maelstrom builder. Like it's not a huge source of damage in this build, at least. Other builds, that's not the case. But so if we're doing a pull, like we're doing like in this case, there's 4 targets. What you want to be thinking about is, first of all, do I have any maelstrom here? In which case now I don't. So I'm going to run in. My goal is to spread flame shock as quickly as possible. So I'll flame shock. I lava lash. It spreads them to every single one. And at this point, I don't have maelstrom, but the next thing I want to do is get 5 maelstrom so I can use my primordial wave buff. Primordial wave is our Necrolord ability. It doesn't do a lot of damage on its own, but our Necrolord ability, because of the Belt of Unity, which is like the double legendary, the double Covenant legendary for Necrolord, it makes our lightning bolt also give us 10% haste for every single target that gets hit with the lightning bolt. So primordial wave by default, if you have 4 flame shocks out and you use primordial wave, then when you lightning bolt the next time, like that, it hits every single one of them. And now, because of our double Lego, I have a 40% mastery buff, which puts me at 75% mastery. So not only does that do a ton of damage, that did 60k damage, the lightning bolt did, but I have a massive buff to haste, which makes our flame shocks tick faster. So let me just reset all of this. I'll do it fresh. Now that I have haste, so the story's a bit different. Sorry, now that I have Maelstrom, it's a bit different. When I have Maelstrom, I know that I don't have to do any time sinking, like any Maelstrom building when I get into the next pack, which means I can jump right into my Primordial Wave benefits. So, Primordial Wave. Instead of Flame Shocking this time, I will use Primordial Wave, because Primordial Wave also applies Flame Shock, so I don't have to waste a global of Flame Shock. So I'll drop my Wind Fury Totem, I will send out my Primordial Wave, I will spread it with Lava Lash, and I will immediately use Lightning Bolt. That's the opener, every single time. Like, you got a big giant haste buff, everything's ticking really fast, you do a lot of damage with your Flame Shock. It's like creeping up already to Lightning Bolt. Before the end of its duration, it'll pass Lightning Bolt. Every single pull is like this, and then the things that change at this point kind of depend on like what you're doing. So I would do for this pull. Now I don't have it anymore. I guess I'll build my Maelstrom until 10 seconds goes by, and I'll do a fresh pull. On 4 targets, I usually end up around like 25k after a minute or so on these target dummies, which is somewhat close to, I guess, what 4 targets would be like in a dungeon too. So I have Wind Fury down. I send out Wave. I spread it. I Lightning Bolt, and I Fire Nova, and now I tab target, and I keep on using Lava Lash every single time I can. Why do we do that? We do that because we took the talent, Lashing Flames, so you can see that each of these people have a debuff on them, which makes them take double damage from your Flame Shock, which is actually like a ton of damage. It shouldn't be understated how much damage this is doing. Like, it's nuts. There's a reason why our overall damage is always like Flame Shock, right? And Lava Lash. Like, it does a lot of damage. So that's the core of the rotation. That's what your aim is. At any moment, like, you have all these procs. You shouldn't get fooled by these procs. Like, you shouldn't use Storm Strike because it's like it got reset, right? You should leave your procs alone. Like, don't keep on reapplying your Crash Lightning. It doesn't do that much damage. Don't keep on reapplying Storm Strike unless you have nothing else to do. What you really want to do is Lava Lash every single person with Flame Shock on it. Just keep on tabbing and Lava Lashing. And if you can do this part, then this is like the core of the rotation. If you did nothing else, you'd be pretty close to being pretty cool. This proc, this is how I track it. This is Hot Hands. Whenever you have Hot Hands, it means every other ability is going to be Lava Lash. So that's going to be a lot of damage, obviously, because the more Lava Lashes, the better, as we've talked about. Every ability that you press has a chance to grant you Hot Hands. I think it's like a 5% chance, but it could be. It feels like it's more, to be honest. It feels like it's up all the time. Now, I haven't been using my Necrolord shield, so I don't have my mastery buff, but I'm usually at 69, and it brings me up to 76. It's a large mastery buff. It's pretty good. So, in terms of cooldowns, we aren't really a cooldown class. We don't have a lot of cooldowns. That's why a lot of us favor having some sort of big, like, on-use trinket. IQD is, like, a very good choice. Aside from IQD, like, a sigil of the first ones would be a very good choice. That just lets us, like, you know, give something to these damage windows that are so common in this game, like the first boss and mists. Like, at least you'll have something to contribute to that damage window that sets you apart from like your normal damage rotation. But I'll do this damage profile again. It's going to be, like I said, Flame Shock, Lava Lash on every single target. The only reason you wouldn't do that is because you were doing like big prio into one target, and you don't need the AoE damage. But if that's not the case, then you really have to do that. If you don't do that, then you're not getting any value out of Lashing Flames. And neither of these options are very good options, to be honest. So you are leaving a lot of damage on the table. This time, what I'm going to change is I'm going to throw in Fire Nova as often as possible. Fire Nova is reduced by haste. So okay, here, let me show you. So normally, Fire Nova, for every target hit by Fire Nova, it will explode and deal damage to every other target. So it kind of works like the epidemic from a Unholy Death Knight, right? And then it recharges over 12 seconds. But the trick here is that this recharge time is accelerated by haste. So let's see what happens. If I do Primordial Wave, I'm gonna get the haste buff, and then we'll see how much it charges down. I'll do Fire Nova, and then I'll do haste buff at 39. It's already down to 4, 3, 2, 1. That was a 7-second cooldown. So that's really important because Fire Nova is a very heavy hitting ability. I did 2 Fire Novas on this target dummy. Actually, maybe I did more. These are 3 Fire Novas. Yeah, 3 Fire Novas, and that was 100,000 damage. You want as many of these as possible, which means you're going to have to kind of, you know, on demand adjust your rotation. Like, if you have a lot of haste, you need to make sure that you're prioritizing Fire Nova and AoE. Like, you're doing Bloodlust, if you get PI, like, always be looking, like, at your Fire Nova cooldown. So, we'll wrap it all up. Sundering, very easy to use. That's the only ability I haven't really touched on yet. You just, you know, press it, basically, whenever you want to. The only thing to know about Sundering is that it's a main hand ability, so it can give you Maelstrom. So, you might want to spend your Crash Lightning to press it. But to be honest, I often cap on Maelstrom, and like I would never not press Lava Lash to spend Maelstrom. Like, our Maelstrom isn't that good in AoE. In single target, it's a bit different, but as far as like AoE and Mythic Plus goes, like Lava Lash is always highest priority. Fire Nova is also very high in priority. But if you have Lashing Flames, which means you'll be Lava Lashing every other ability, nothing should stop you from Lava Lashing every other ability, even if you're gonna like cap on Maelstrom. So here, let me refresh all my buffs. I will reset my damage. We're good. I will drop a Wind Fury Totem, trigger my buff, and I'm gonna go Primordial Wave, spread it, base buff, dogs, and IQD. I have 2 Fire Dogs, which I'll go over next. Fire Nova, see, I'm capping on Maelstrom, but that's fine because I can't risk missing any of these Lava Lashes because Lava Lash does so much damage. So here, now I'm in another Hot Hands window, so I'm constantly doing Lava Lash every other ability. Here, I have, oh, I just missed a, Lava Lash because I'm not used to doing guides on YouTube. But now we have another window. We're gonna, every other ability is gonna be Lava Lash, Fire Nova, Lava Lash, Primordial Wave, another haste buff. Making sure everything, all the time, has your Lashing Flames on it. So I just forego Fire Nova there, because it would have come at the expense of a Lava Lash in my Hot Hands window. So what am I at? I'm at 30k right now. Fire Nova, and what I'm doing is just making sure I always use Fire Nova right away, and I never miss a Lava Lash. That's what I'm basically doing right now. So there's Fire Nova, lots of damage, and I'll stop at the 1 minute 30-second mark. Here, another Lava Lash, and we're done. One more Fire Nova, why not? Okay, so this is your damage profile in AoE. You do a lot of Lava Lashing. I did 32 Lava Lashes over a minute and a half. Flame Shock is a very strong ability. Don't let it fool you. It's ticking for like, it crits for like 1,000, right? So if you're on 6 targets, like you're going to be doing a ton of damage. And it's doing, usually like it's doing 2x damage because you're doing Lava Lashes on it because of her talents. So Fire Nova, very, very big. Make sure you always use it immediately unless it's at the expense of a Hot Hands Lava Lash. You can delay a Lava Lash, a regular Lava Lash, for a little bit to use your Fire Nova, because Fire Nova will do more damage than Lava Lash, but if you're in that window, you have to use Lava Lash every single time because, like, who knows when the next window will be. You have to, like, you really take advantage of those windows. That's it. It's not a very complicated rotation. In terms of, like, spenders, you basically want to make sure you always have enough for your Primordial Wave, so you can actually spend a full 5 Maelstrom Lightning Bolt, so you can get the full effect of your Lightning Bolt. So okay, one thing I didn't really touch on for Primordial Wave was everything that has your Primordial Wave. Let me get my Maelstrom back up. Everything that has your Flame Shock will get hit by your next Lightning Bolt after you Primordial Wave. That's true. So that means you can get up to 6 Lightning Bolts at once, but your original Lightning Bolt that you press still goes off. So Skull, I will do Primordial Wave, I will spread it, I'll even throw it on that guy. So now we're going to do Lightning Bolt. It's going to hit all of these people, and it'll hit Skull twice. So what was that? That was almost 80,000 damage for 5 targets. At 5 targets, with your Flame Shock, you'll have 6 Lightning Bolts going out. The original Lightning Bolt, and 1 more Lightning Bolt for every Flame Shock that you have. So that was a ton of haste, obviously. That was 50% haste. I think that's the only big thing you have to do. Okay, so maybe we can also find an example of Primordial Wave triggering itself again through the conduit. 1 in 3 of these will trigger. So let's see. I'll reset the damage over here. I will hit that guy with a Flame Shock, and I'll hit that guy with a Flame Shock. So now we're at max value Flame Shocks. Primordial Wave, spread it to these guys, and I will send it. That's a lot of damage. It did not reset, though, unfortunately. How much damage was that, though? We will see our Lightning Bolt did 80,000 damage. And I have 100% haste, which is nice. I don't actually understand. It must give you haste in rating or something. I have no idea how it works because that should have been 60% haste. But I went from 25% haste up to 100. I don't understand that math. I have no idea why that's happening. But, I mean, the more targets, the more haste. That's generally true. So let's see if we can proc our Primordial Wave buff again. I'll get set up for Flame Shocks on these guys. Here, Primordial Wave, spread, and Lightning Bolt. Didn't work. Well, what I'm trying to highlight to you, do you see this buff over here on my weak aura? This is the haste buff. If I get a proc of Primordial Wave after I get this haste buff, I shouldn't consume Primordial Wave again. I should wait until the haste buff falls off. Like, you want that haste buff as much as possible. That will be more damage, or more damage than I guess it would have been to not always maintain the haste buff. You want to make sure that you're always maintaining like as much haste buff as possible. You don't want to use 2 of these in a row, even though it would be like a lot of lightning bolts, right? You know, in 3 seconds. That's not important. The haste buff is what's important as far as like your rotation is concerned. But we'll see if we can get it one more time. So I'll Flame Shock this target dummy once I can. Wave, spread, and shoot. And I got it. So cool. I have Primordial Wave, but I'm not going to do it. Not until this haste buff wears out. I'm just going to keep on doing my thing. I'm going to be doing my rotation, getting max value out of the haste. Now it's gone. I will Primordial Wave, spread, and shoot again. That's what you want to do. You don't want to spam these primordial waves out. You want to maintain that haste buff as much as possible. I think that's about it for this for the different abilities that you can get. Crash Lightning. If you use Crash Lightning, basically it makes all of your abilities do a little bit of damage while you're yeah, like they do a little bit of AoE damage, but it's honestly not that much damage. It's like here, let me do another round just to see how much damage that comes out to. I'll just do a couple of moves here. So okay, from that, let's get the haste buff. There. Get a little sundering in there. Boom. So this should be enough. I will go until the hot hands window runs out because hot hands is so fun. Okay. So how much did that do? My Crash Lightning ability itself was probably this. This one hit 3 times for 11k. Crash Lightning hits for very little damage. The actual buff from Crash Lightning caused 41k damage. So it's non-trivial. You do want to keep it up, but you can see like it's nothing compared to Flame Shotgun, Lava Lash, and Fire Nova. Never sacrifice any ability to maintain that buff. Any of these 3 abilities to maintain that buff. You do want to maintain the buff, and ideally it won't drop off in the first place. But if you find yourself in a position where you have to choose, like don't sacrifice those abilities. Now I will go over to maybe 1 or 2 pulls, real pulls with PLA, so I can go over some like highlights from it. We'll be looking at a pull in a mists right now. This was a 21 mists that we recently did. I will slow it down a little bit so that I can call things out as they happen. This pull that we're going into, this is the first pull in the maze. There's only going to be 4 targets in this pull. So what I do for this target count, for the first thing I do is I think, how many targets are there? There's 4. That means I don't need to use Flame Shock because I can Primordial Wave and Lava Lash, and that will mean that every target has Flame Shock. So 4 targets, that's good. I don't need 2 globals to get max value out of my Flame Shocks. I'm going to also, I have a focus macro over here, so I have a mouse over focus macro, so I decide who I'm going to be kicking up front, which puts them right here, so I can see the cast bar right by my weak auras. It's all in like the same spot. So I come in, I decide I'm kicking the Condom Tender, and I'm running in, dropping Wind Fury Totem. I'm going to Primordial Wave, and then I'm going to Lava Lash to spread it. I got a Hot Hands window, which is great, and I'm going to send my Primordial Wave Lightning Bolts out. That hits for 60k. Now I'm going into Lava Lashing every single target. I'm tab target Lava Lashing. That sound means I got PI, which is very fun. I'm making sure I hit every single Lava Lash. You can see over here on the right. This is my Flame Shock damage. This is my Lava Lash. Lava Lash is hitting for 30k, right? 4 targets, Lava Lash will crit for 30k. I send out Sundering. Sundering hits for 30k total among all the different mobs. I'm hitting all of these different Lava Lashes. I send my Fire Nova out. Hits for 46k. And that's really all there is to it. Like, I'm just making sure I hit every single Lava Lash. I am kicking when I have to. Having the focus kick is like very, very nice for this because you don't want to like, you know, dedicate any mental energy to clicking on the guy just before it goes off and doing a wind shear on him. It's like use focus targets, use focus kicks. It's like it makes your life so much easier. I'm reapplying my buff now because I have downtime. I'm going to be hitting this guy with Lava Lashes. I don't have to worry about hitting that guy yet with Lava Lash because he still has like 7 seconds left on his buff. And this guy is now Sanguine healed, so I'm deciding like, okay, this guy is basically dead. Don't worry about him. Just focus on this guy while I have the other guy alive to have more Flame Shocks to actually buff up my Lava Lashes so we can get this guy down sooner. I think he spears me, but luckily I did a full Fleshcraft, so it doesn't even hurt. And then once you're on one target, it's really just a matter of like deprioritizing your AoE abilities, which is really just Fire Nova, to be honest. Like it's very similar whether or not you're in AoE. It's just like whether or not Fire Nova is like very important. this is another pull from later on in the run, just before the second boss, and we're pulling through the walls here with the Warlock Pet. The first thing I do is I count the number of mobs that are coming in. There are 5 mobs in this pull, which means if I just use Primordial Wave and Lava Lash, all of them won't have Flame Shock on it. So that means that I have to use Flame Shock on one of these guys, and then tab target to a different guy, and then use Primordial Wave and Lava Lash again, and that will guarantee that all of the targets that exist actually have my buff on them. I'm kind of zoned out here, so I've applied my Flame Shock to one person, and I'm just waiting for the moment that I can get in close enough to use all of my abilities. Yeah, so now they all have Lava Lash. Sorry, they all have Flame Shock on them. So now I can safely, I guess I pop IQD here, and I do a big Lightning Bolt, 47k. My haste is up to 87%. That's a 5 target haste buff, and I go into my Lava Lash window. My Lava Lash my Hot Hands window, sorry. I think Lava Lash is reduced by haste as well. So the more haste you have, like the more Lava Lashes you can do, even if you don't have the Hot Hands window up. So like, you know, with enough like haste, with like maybe a Vi buff and a Bloodlust, you can actually do a lot of Lava Lashing. If you have Hot Hands and you have an buff, then every global becomes Lava Lash, which is pretty fun. You only won't Lava Lash to Fire Nova at that point. Yep, so that's that entire pull. It was kind of a tough pull because you couldn't actually run in and do damage the entire time. And this week is awful as well because, like, look at these tornadoes everywhere. But even on a bad pull, we're able to pull, like, you know, 20k pretty comfortably. So we never go, like, crazy high, but we never dip crazy low either. Unless we just, like, you know, can't play the game like we're doing here. Here's a different pull. This is going to be a boss fight, the first boss in Theater of Pain, so it'll be actually a boss. We'll have relics in this one as well, which I just kind of ignore. This one will show you about like making choices between spreading your Lava Lash, Lashing Flames, and funneling. One thing to note is that you want to make sure when the countdown gets to 1, you send out your Spirit Wolves, because you will get 5 or 6 Maelstrom when you start the actual dungeon. So this is my key, and I didn't do it. That's fine though. The buff lasts plenty of time. The dogs go away, but you have the Maelstrom, which is like amazing because you don't have to worry about like building Maelstrom for the first pull. So we're gonna go in, and I'll slow it down a little bit. This is a nice, interesting boss because it's a pretty good target count for us. I'm basically gonna ignore everything except Desia. And you'll see, like, the damage is just nuts because you have so many targets here where Flame Shock is taking, where you can just, like, you know, just completely destroy Desia. So we get in. There's 4 targets here, so all I have to do is send out a Primordial Wave, although I think I might have actually mistakenly pressed Flame Shock on somebody else, probably on the Bloodhorn. So I send him out. I get my haste buff. We have Lust. We will have Lust. Yeah, we do have Lust. And I have my haste buff, so I'm at around 100% haste, although I would have thought that it would be actually a bit higher. But where do I have it yet? I do have it, because I saw the lightning bolt there. Yeah, here it is. So I guess just 100%. That's fine. The thing with this fight is Desia has to die. Like, Desia is giving your tank a healing debuff, which is making the fight very hard. These other people also have mechanics that you want to basically focus Sathel and always kick the Searing Pain, because that hurts the party a lot. And usually you need soothes. So we have a rogue, we have 1 soothe. The rogue will soothe the Bloodhorn because he will enrage periodically, so he has to die. My other 2 teammates are focusing down the Bloodhorn, and I'm focusing on Desia right here. And you can see my Lava Lashes are hitting for, like, that one was like 24k, 23k. And once I get into a Hot Hands window, it's going to be like even more nuts. So here I have a window, and this means that every other global, I'm doing like 20,000 damage to Desia. And I think at the end here, I'm getting booped up in the air, which is like really rough. This affix is just like the worst affix. I cannot stand playing this affix. it's getting booped up. One thing that you have to notice, actually, did you see that? You have to decide in real scenarios, like on a target dummy, it's nice because you can dedicate all of your globals to doing things like damage, but in the real world, you'll have to do things like purge, right? Desia gets this debuff, which makes every attack that she does heal her. I think one of these other people apply it to her, but basically you have to purge it off. If you don't purge it off, like she's just healing, and maybe your overall doesn't look as bad, but the key is definitely worse. So you have to dedicate some buttons. Just try not to, lose damage on doing that. In my case, I was booped up in the air from a storm, so I couldn't damage anyway. So I might as well just, send the purge. And while this is happening in the background, I'm not doing anything different than the other polls. I'll just bring up the damage from that fight. I end up doing 1.3 million to Desia, which is definitely the most damage to Desia, like by far. If I go in over here, like you can see all of this damage over here. Oh, let me back out a little bit. This whole segment is Bloodlust, and all of it is Flame Shock from all of the targets and Lava Lash, and it's exclusively on Desia. So in like 30 seconds, I'm doing like 250,000 to her. It's very nice. Not many classes can do that sort of thing. You can always decide to do it. Maybe your team actually has a lot of single target and they're going to do Desia for you, so you don't have to make the choice I made here. Maybe what you'll do instead is make sure that every one of these bosses has Lashing Flames up on them, which might probably, that could probably be the way to go. Maybe I should have done that too, because it would have only taken like 2 globals just to get that damage off, but I just pumped everything in Desia. That was easier. Lots of stuff happening over here. It's like a very complicated fight, or sorry, a very hectic fight with like this affix. It makes it very unfun. I just focused on Desia. So here's an example of a boss fight. I'll have one more example, I think, where I actually properly handle relics. Here's an example of a large pull. I couldn't find any from DOS, but the first pull of Necrotic Wake is also very large. I think there's like 4, 8, 12, 15 mobs in this pull. So this is a good example because this is above your AoE cap. You won't be able to actually spread Flame Shock out to all of these mobs. So you gotta make some choices. I'll slow it down a bit. You can see the first thing I do is I Flame Shock something, anything, because I know that I will only get 4 Flame Shocks up if I just do my Primordial Wave and Lava Lash spread. I know it looks like we may not be doing those 4, but still, it's still a big enough pull to get the point across. I'm going to focus this guy because I will be kicking him. I know that. That's always the case. I'll probably drop my Wind Fury Totem any second now. I spread my Lava Lash. That brings me up to... I spread my Flame Shocks, which brings me up to 5 Flame Shocks at this point. So I can send my Haste buff, I can send my Dogs, and I can Fire Nova. And that's a decent-sized Fire Nova. It's decent enough that I'm not going to wait to... I'm not going to hold my Fire Nova for the 6th... Flame Shock. Like, I'll just do more Fire Novas. It's always better to do more things, usually, than hold things. But clearly I'm doing a bad job of actually dropping Wind Fury Totem at this point, but sometimes that happens. So the trick with these pulls is you can't Flame Shock everybody, so you have to be careful when you tab target that you're not actually applying your Lava Lash debuff, your Lashing Flames debuff, to something that doesn't have your debuff for Flame Shock on it already. That's the only trick. You have to be really, really focused here. Like, you have to just, like, not get overwhelmed by all of the different mobs jumping around. You have to say just, like, I know I'm going to Flame Shock one, I'm going to Primordial Wave the other one, I'm going to spread it, and then I'm just going to start doing my normal rotation as though there were literally 6 mobs here. And eventually, enough mobs will die so that it's not a problem anymore, and they fit into, like, your normal rotation like you'd expect them to, but you basically just won't be able to with complete efficiency, get your Lashing Flames out onto the exact right targets. You're going to be like spamming, basically. And the reason that I updated my weak auras was actually this. Like, this icon over here, this Flame Shock icon, it'll glow if my current target doesn't have Flame Shock. So I can just, like, keep on tabbing, and at a glance I'll know, like, if my target is missing Flame Shock or not. So if I I target like a Spiteful, you can see right here, like it's saying like he's missing Flame Shock, right? I don't really care, it's a Spiteful, but you get the idea. Just try to set up your UI so that you can tell like really quickly if you're you're wasting your Lashing Flames or you're using it appropriately. And here is the second boss in Mists. This is a good example because this is a mostly single target fight. It's a mix. So single target is a bit different in that you care about different things, obviously. Like you'll prioritize Storm Strike now higher than you'll prioritize Fire Nova, for example, because Storm Strike will give you Maelstrom that you can spend on Lightning Bolts on the boss. And more Maelstrom is better to spend if you have tier set, of course, because you get more dogs. Whereas Fire Nova is just like a little bit of damage. But there's a couple things to keep in mind with bosses. Most bosses, I mean all bosses now, have the relics. So if it's a single target boss fight, you want to make sure that you can use the relics to actually get a big buff from haste out. So I make a mistake here. I use Flame Shock. I should have just used Primordial Wave. Hopefully I will do that. I do Fire Nova first. I am hard padding here. Yeah, I tried to get my... So I switched over to Mistcaller because the target of your Primordial Wave will receive the Kevin's Oozling debuff, so I didn't want to waste it on the Relic. But it was a gamble. It was definitely a gamble because the relics might die while I'm trying to do that. So let's see if they do. They don't. I get my haste buff off, so I exploit the brief time where there are relics to improve my single target damage. And this is why PLA is so good, even in like single target situations, because Mythic Plus always has ads. Like every boss has something, right? Like in this boss, in the first fight, it's 2 target cleave. The last boss in this dungeon is periodic 4 target ad phases, and this one also has ad phases. So you want to do all that you can do to just like amp up your damage, and PLA gives you options to do that. But now it's more or less single target. I should be hexing that Vulpin. I may or may not do that depending on how I feel on which day. But here the rotation is basically Lava Lash above all else. Lava Lash Storm Strike is probably the second highest spender. Sorry, the second highest priority if you aren't capped on Maelstrom. Because remember, your main hand abilities will give you Maelstrom. So in this case, right now, I go Lava Lash and I spend. What I should be doing here actually is throwing out Flame Shocks onto these other 4 ads, so I can see it. Yeah, so actually I did that. Nice, good for me. So I sent out 1 Flame Shock to that corner ad because if I Flame Shock it, then I'll include it in my haste buff for Primordial Wave. So there's always like little opportunities you have to just like optimize your single target damage because of like Necro and PLA. So because there's 1 more Flame Shock out there, that means I'm doing more single target damage to this clone, and not to Mistcaller, but I could take that path with the Vulpin. I could Flame Shock the Vulpin, but then we can't CC it, obviously. But sometimes we have like enough slows and stuns that I do it. So we're back to pure single target, and I'm Lava Lashing. When I can't Lava Lash, I'm using my single target abilities. Storm Strike has a high chance of giving me Maelstrom. Maelstrom from Crash Lightning is also a thing, so that's like usually my second go-to after my Lava Lash and my Storm Strike on cooldown. And when those are all gone, I go Frost Strike. And if Frost Strike's gone, then I'll fall back to like Flame Shock or Fire Nova. And those are just like really spenders. If you go and look at your overall at the end, like for like a single target boss fight, they'll be a very small component, but it's either that, like, get 2,000 or 3,000 damage from Flame Shock or Fire Nova, or do nothing, right? So easy choice. Probably an extra like 50,000 damage at the end of the fight. And yeah, this is basically it. The big trick with bosses is just like optimizing your damage by like tagging mobs with Fire Novas, saving your Primordial Wave for ad phases, and just like leveraging all of the cool ad mechanics that Mythic Plus has. And that, like I said, part of the reason why pure single target builds aren't going to beat out PLA is because you have all of these cool opportunities to do things like this in Mythic Plus. Even in like 5 target boss encounters, sorry, 5 boss dungeons, like top, like they have ads, right? Like the first boss is 3 bosses. The second boss has a flag ad phase. Third boss is the third boss, the Lich Wing. The Lich is pure single target, so that's one. But the A bomb has 2 target ads that come out. The last boss has 5 target ads that come out. Like there's always chances to do more damage with PLA through ads. And we are back in Mists, of course. This is a bit of a different pull. This is a single pull, like a 1-person pull, and there are the relics. This is the single pull in the maze. Like usually you'll get like, you know, 1 of 3 different mobs here. There are different ways you can handle this, but what you really want to do is, if you can, capitalize on this by making sure you get your Primordial Wave buff out at max efficiency. So if you can, like at all, you want to get full flame shocks on all 3 of them, send out your Primordial Wave, and then do a lightning bolt while they're all still alive. I have a series of macros every time you see me at the start of a pull. So right here you'll see. Now you'll see like a little wheel come up. I'll pause it when it does. Now that's my Chinese hex for the maze. So there, this little wheel. I do it really fast, but basically there's macros on this wheel, and the left-hand side says target or a relic. So I don't have to worry about clicking. I actually turned off their unit frames because it's like too busy for me. So I always just like target them with this macro. And I have a little bite sound that happens when I target them with a weak aura, so that I know I targeted a relic as opposed to like a real mob. But now I just make sure I focus down I usually, we're pretty good at focusing down relics, so we can do that. So I get the full haste buff. I go from 25 to 75%, and then we have up finally, and I usually prefer to focus down just because we have to kill him eventually anyway, and he can be a bother to our tanks. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I leave him up for more funnel onto the main target, which could be one thing that we do. But in this case, we want to kill really fast so that we can pull more enemies in the maze. So there's no like hard and set rule about like, you know, always kill first or always kill second. It's like, what do you want to do? Like, is your tank in danger? Then maybe don't kill him first. If you need to pull through something and he's holding up your key, then maybe kill him first. It's kind of up in the air that way. This fooled me right now. Like, usually what happens is this guy jumps back and tongues, but he didn't tongue. So I went in front of him and he did the AoE and the tongue, and that was a little weird. But yep, this is just like every other pull, right? Like, you want to make sure that you maintain our 2 debuffs on him, and then prioritize your best abilities in single target. I'm holding right now my Primordial Wave because I know we're pulling through a wall, and I want to have that out for when like 5 mobs come in a couple of seconds. So I'm not spending it. Otherwise, I would spend it. But yeah, for 1 target, like pretty much the same as multiple targets. So now we get this horde of new enemies. What do? I take a quick inventory. There's 5 of them. I know I need at least 1 flame shock if I'm gonna get all of them flame shocked as soon as possible. So he casted that buff on himself, the healing buff. The tender casted the healing buff on himself as he was running in. We couldn't kick it, but you can purge it. So you should purge it. So you can just, you know, target that guy and purge it. Then that's great. I think I didn't have to there because our rogue probably used Blood Elf Purge on all of them, but still good to do. I am targeting this guy for kick. They are now we finally have the chance to go in, right? So I send out Primordial Wave, I spread it with Lava Lash, and I send a Lightning Bolt, and we have our haste buff. We are at 100% haste again. I do Sundering, because Sundering also interrupts them. So like if they're doing their rampage, that you can stop the kicks with Sundering. Otherwise, I'm tab targeting, and I'm using Lava Lash. So it's really important to have like a UI that lets you know who has your Lashing Flames debuff on them or not. Sometimes you can't reach them all, like right now. Like sometimes I can't get to every single enemy to apply Lava Lash to them. But at this point, everyone except for the defender has it. So Looks like it maybe fell off the stinger. But yeah, sometimes tab targeting doesn't work all that great. Like sometimes it's just like you don't get lucky and the tab target order doesn't target a new guy, and then a couple of seconds go by without you reapplying it. But it's not a huge deal. Just try to make it not happen if you at all can. And that's it. That is how you play PLA. So just to recap, PLA in a nutshell is Necro Lord for the Primordial Wave ability, which will give you big lightning bolts on all of your Flame Shock targets, which will in turn give you big haste buff, which will reduce the cooldown of your big damage abilities in Mythic Plus, Fire Nova, and Lashing Flames. Also Crash Lightning, I guess, to be honest. But you're going to be prioritizing your Lava Lash above everything when you have Hot Hands, and Fire Nova will be highest priority in AoE if you don't have a Lava Lash Hot Hands window, because this is doing a lot of AoE damage. The more of these you can fit into one pull, like the better you'll be doing. Usually you're thinking about Lava Lashing, to be honest. Like it's a lot of Lava Lash. You're pressing a bunch of Lava Lash, which is actually pretty fun. But you're playing these talents almost pretty much all the time. Lashing Flames, Hot Hands, Fire Nova, Sundering, and Spirits, and these are up to you. The ones that aren't damage are up to you. I prefer Feral Lunge and Spirit Wolf. You can do whatever you want. Primal Lava Actuators is our legendary. It buffs our our Lava Lashes through our Flame Shocks to do lots of damage, and just make sure you have your double Lego equipped somewhere. I put it on my boots, but you can put it anywhere, up to you. I think there's like various guides out there to determine the optimal strategy for where to put these things. But it's not a terribly complicated build. It's the most complicated build that we have access to, I think, as Enhancement Shaman. The other ones, as we'll see, are easier, but they don't perform as well, and they don't have the flexibility and the power that this one has. So I recommend actually, putting some time into doing this. Like the tab targeting playstyle is a bit different from other classes, but it definitely comes out in the end as more overall. So it is advised. While PLA will be what we use almost all the time, another viable build, which isn't as good, but is decent and offers some other things that PLA doesn't offer, is a very weird build. It's Skybreaker's Fiery Demise as Venthyr. So this is the only other build that I've seriously run in high keys because it does really good, consistent AoE damage. My top overall for hauls has actually been in this build. Now you give up a lot of single target damage, I'd say, to do this, but you gain other things. So let's go over what those things are. Much like in the last video, the last section, we'll go over like the goals and how it works, different things that you need to adjust to actually get the most out of it. The goal of this one is lots of crit through Flame Shocks to reduce the cooldown of our Chain Harvest ability. So how do we do that? Well, first thing is we spec differently. We gear differently. We gear for crit when we're in this build. So in the other build, I had like 14% crit. In this build, I have 31% crit. And the legendary that we're using, which is a elemental legendary, is Skybreaker's Fiery Demise. We don't actually get half the benefit of this legendary, but we do get the improved crit chance on Flame Shock. So at this point, my Flame Shocks have a 50 plus 30, like 80% chance to be critical strikes. And if I'm in a real group, I'll use my Soleil's Trinket on somebody, and I'll get even more critical strike. Usually, there's at least one critical strike party member in your groups, so you get pretty massive CDR on your Chain Harvests with this build. The talents are pretty much the same, actually. Yeah, they're the same talents. You still run Hot Hands. You still run Lashing Flames. You still want to get your AoE out onto everybody and use Lashing Flames to buff your fire damage. It's probably even more important now because like your Flame Shocks are doing more damage this time because they're almost always critting. Fire Nova is a lot easier to get out at max value because Chain Harvest will be doing your Flame Shock application for you, and it's pretty pretty passive. Different covenant, obviously. So what do? Typically, we run Theatar when we're doing this. Now you're gonna have a ton of off healing. Chain Harvest is cool because it benefits off of having like your 5 Maelstrom stacked up. So like normally we have 5 Maelstrom and we spend it on Lightning Bolt, but now we'll have 5 Maelstrom and we'll spend it on Chain Harvest for the most part. So Theatar is nice because it gives you lots of like consistent damage. Like he has lots of like stat buff type things. He has his T, which can give you any secondary or primary stat. Agi is nice. Crit would be preferred, obviously, right now, but you can't really choose what you get with the T. T is kind of weird. If I change my covenant right now, I'll lose a T buff, like, for an hour. That's like, that seems like an oversight on them. This build is a bit different because you usually go with Wasteland Propriety as opposed to a third Potency Conduit, even though we do have good Potency Conduits, but obviously having Magma Fist is less impactful if you're not going to be running Primal Lava Actuators because your Lava Lashes aren't getting like juiced up anymore. It would still be good, but because of how often we're doing Chain Harvests, this ends up just like giving us like a perpetual 6% burst buff, and everybody else in the group gets like a 3% burst buff as well. So there's that. Usually, if you have a food buff in this build, I'll be doing crit food. The food buff will give us a lot of extra avoidance as well as speed. So here, my avoidance is now at 9%, and I'll have a lot of extra versatility. So my verse is at 9% by base, but every time I press Chain Harvest, it'll go up to like 15%. So you're pretty tanky in this build relative to other builds as well. It actually feels pretty good to play. I wouldn't do it on Tyran weeks ever, and I wouldn't do it on most dungeons, to be honest, unless like you had a lot of like consistent AoE, like weekly keys, or you're running people through stuff and you want extra off healing. Like these are good chances to do it, or you just like hate the playstyle of PLA. This is like a viable option. You can go with Nadia, but Theatar is pretty nice and consistent. Nadia is kind of RNG. I really don't like her because you might get her buff at like an inopportune time and it just like gets wasted. So I prefer going with Theatar when I'm doing this build. I will walk over to the target dummies, and we are event there. So we actually have target dummies. And I will go through the goal of this. This is a much easier build to explain. There's not much going on. You basically just want to press Chain Harvest all the time, right? That's what this build is about. So you still start off by doing Wind Fury totems. You run in. For your first one like this, you'll be dry. So here, I'll restart with some Maelstrom, because realistically, you shouldn't be going into packs with no Maelstrom. Like you should make sure at the end of every single pack, you end it with like 5 Maelstrom, so you can go right into the next pack and be efficient. So we have Maelstrom. Chain Harvest, I'm going to send it in a second on these guys. You'll see that it does a lot of damage. It'll give us a big buff as well. I'm going to send out my dogs and my IQD before I just refresh the Maelstrom stacks. Before I do it, so I can like juice it up a little bit. Hopefully, I think none of our dog buffs actually impact our Chain Harvest, so I'll send it, I guess, after. I'll do IQD first, and then I'll do Chain Harvest. So IQD, I get haste, doesn't matter. Chain Harvest, I get a big burst buff. I'm at 15%. I send out my dogs, and then I Fire Nova, then I Sunder. Like that Fire Nova and that Sunder were juiced up from the burst buff, and now I just go into like my normal rotation. Oh, and look, how long was that? That was like less than 15 seconds, and I already have a second Chain Harvest coming up, right? Like this is actually like kind of a nuts. This build is nuts. Like I have so many Chain Harvests, like another Chain Harvest. It's been 30 seconds, and that was 3 Chain Harvests. So this is a really easy and fun build to do. I think I had accelerated Chain Harvests there because I had extra haste, so I was getting more crits than usual for that time period through my Flame Shocks. But I mean, this is good damage, right? Like I'm doing 30k on these guys, and I don't have to really think very much at all. I haven't even really been applying my Lashing Flames on them. Another Chain Harvest, and each one of these Chain Harvests is like really strong. Like that hit for 115k, that Chain Harvest. It is a completely viable build. It is not as good. It is easier to do well with this build. than it is with the other build, because there's less to think about. Like, you don't have to make the choices about like lava lash and lashing flames and all that stuff. It's very easy to manage chain harvest compared to primordial wave, because there's no setup for it. But yeah, like you literally just press it when it's on cooldown. And let's see, how much damage was that? My chain harvest was the top, obviously. It did 750,000 with 6 button presses, right? Like, this is a very fun build. It is definitely viable for AoE focused weeks and AoE focused dungeons. I wouldn't run this in the Theater of Pain, but like, no one will grief you for running it in like a halls or a DOS or something like that. Now, I wouldn't run it in a high key DOS because I want to make sure that I can funnel down those higher mobs. But if you're just doing weeklies or you just want to have like a little bit of fun, this is a very viable build. All the same buttons are there. They're just like easier to press. I'd say the only thing to keep in mind with this build is make sure you send out your Fire Nova and your Sunder after you send out your first Chain Harvest. So here, Chain Harvest, blow up, and then Sunder. Like, you want the 6% damage buff on those abilities. So just make sure you sequence it that way. Not a huge deal, but it is a little min-max you can do for this. You wouldn't have massive overall differences if you did or didn't do that, but I mean, just do it, yeah. I'll try and find a couple of keys. I think I only did one big key like this with this build, so I'll go over a few polls in there and we'll see, like, you know, how this plays out in real time. The dungeon to look at when we're talking about this build is always going to be HOA for me. We come in, we're doing this shard pack here. I have to go and get that hex so the pat doesn't come in. And compared with the other one, this will be easy. Like, I should be running in here. I'll lust pretty soon. I'm going to send out my chain harvest. Just like, I'll just press the button. It does the job of targeting for me, right? Just make sure you don't pull aggro and die right away. That's definitely happened to me before. I send out my dogs. I have double fire dogs, which would be very exciting if I was doing PLA, but unfortunately I am not. So no benefit from fire dogs, really. Well, it actually is a big benefit, I guess, to my AoE anyway, because we still do lots of flame shock damage. But I send out my first chain harvest. It hits for 78k. The other guys aren't in here yet, so I send out my first Fire Nova, which is super buffed by fire dogs. For, if you don't know, every fire dog gives you like 20% extra fire damage. So between the fire dogs and the verse, I'm doing like 100,000 damage every time I press Fire Nova, which is like, that's a lot of damage, right? it's a good amount of damage. I am doing Lashing Flames, so I should be tab target lava lashing this entire time as well. Let's see if I'm good about that. I pop Astral Shift here as a defensive, because they're doing the shard AoE. And this entire time, it's been... When did we start the poll? Let's go back. Let's see. So it's been about, I don't know, around 15 seconds I did the first one. The first Chain Harvest. So every time these things tick over here, which is a lot. Oh, I think I might not do Bloodlust. This was early on in my Shaman career, before I learned how to Bloodlust. Like, I'm still having trouble, to be honest, pressing Bloodlust, but hopefully I press it eventually. I think I pressed it on the second poll, actually, unfortunately. So it's been 15 seconds since the last Chain Harvest, and I have another Chain Harvest. I am hurt, and so is the healer, but Chain Harvest heals us. Like, and not for a little bit, for like a ton, actually. I still managed to get hurt. I had other stuff on me, but that healing is non-trivial. Like, I'm doing more than half the damage, sorry, more than half the healing of the healer on this pull. So, and then, what was that? So I did my Chain Harvest, and I have a 91k Fire Nova. This is like a pretty chill pull. One note here is that the buff over here, so I'm standing in this umbrella. Theatar gives you a mastery buff if you stand in the umbrella. Like, if the umbrella is in a bad spot, just back off, stand in the umbrella, and press Fire Nova. Like, Fire Nova will benefit like a lot with this extra mastery. Like, my build, at this point in time. I think it's like 32% mastery. So this is like doubling my mastery, which is just like 30% extra damage, I think, for our fire spells, our non-physical spells. So I do another Chain Harvest there, and I get hurt because my pinky toe was in that swirly. But we're just doing like the same thing. Like I'm not doing a great job, I think, at actually keeping my Lashing Flames up. This was a while ago though. I was a young shaman here. I'm not sure what my eye level is. I think definitely I don't have any tier here. I have 2 set. I have 2 set now, so I guess I barely have any tier regardless. But yeah, you can see like I don't have the overall counts for this dungeon anymore, but all of that damage was basically just, you know, pressing Chain Harvest on cooldown, which was like every 15 to 20 seconds. It's a lot of chain harvesting. Here's another pull from the same dungeon. You can tell this is definitely a much more relaxed build than Necro. Like I don't have to worry about like, you know, just getting one one Flame Shock out and doubling it up with my Primordial Wave and then getting the haste buff. Like you just run in, like you send Chain Harvest, and like you live your life, you know. Like here, Chain Harvest, I send it 100,000 damage just for pressing a button. I get to do that in like, it looks like at this rate, like 4 more seconds, right? Like it is kind of crazy. And let's see, like if I use my IQD here, it's crit IQD. So at this point, what do I have? I have a 100% crit chance for the next 20 seconds on my flame my Flame Shock. Every single one will crit. Look, it's already down to 42 seconds, even though I just used it. So I'm gonna get it right now. Literally every single Flame Shock is a crit, and it crits for like 2k. I think I probably should be gearing a bit more for mastery than I have been, because that is all mastery buffable damage. I stand in the umbrella, so I get the mastery buff before I use my Fire Nova. It doesn't do as much because all the mobs are spread out at this point, but it does a good amount, right? It is a viable build, even though it's very weird. I feel like it probably shouldn't work. We probably shouldn't be able to get the benefit to our Flame Shock, but we do. So hey, here we are, pressing Chain Harvest very, very often. But I should mention that here's an example of the last boss in Halls. The single target isn't amazing. It's, I think, probably a little bit under PLA, and on average, it'll be a lot under PLA. Like you might get really lucky with PLA and just get like a bunch of hot hand windows and do a lot of damage with your Lava Lash, but with this one, it's not amazing. I mean, 12k single target, it's not too bad, but it's a fortified week, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, fortified week, so the bosses die pretty quick, so my overall didn't have a good chance to go down, but you do other things, like you have basically a healer CD for these damage phases, right? Like I can heal everybody in a phase like this. I don't have to do all of the damage. Well, I guess that's basically gonna be what it comes down to, is like, do you need to do all the damage, or do you have the flexibility to do a little bit of support work? It depends if you're in like a dedicated comp with people that you know, or I mean, if you're really just looking to have fun in keys, go ahead and do it, because like any damage is good enough anyway. But yeah, it's not the best single target. It's not abysmal single target. It might be better single target than like a no tier set Elemental Shaman, which is like, I guess not saying a lot for them, but at least like in their Mythic Plus build, this might be better single target damage than it would have been otherwise. But it is viable. It is something you can do. You sacrifice a single target, you sacrifice funnel, but it's not crazy to do. So just to recap, the Skybreaker's Fiery Demise build, the whole goal of this build is to maximize your crit chance so that you can get as many chain harvests as possible, so that you can do a lot of AoE damage passively, well, with a single button press, while you're doing a lot of utility work through Theatar's Tree, through Wasteland Propriety, granting yourself and your teammates versatility and a ton of healing. You don't have the single target damage, you don't have the funnel, but you do actually do pretty good, consistent AoE damage with not a lot of like mental overhead into getting like the most out of the build. It's an easy build to play. It's viable. don't feel crazy for doing it if you don't want to deal with PLA. I wouldn't do this because it is definitely worse than PLA, and in higher keys, the higher you go, the more it's going to matter that it's worse than PLA. But it's not crazy. You can go ahead and do it if you like it. Have fun in keys, and don't let people call you weird names. I will give an honorable mention to another build that is possible but not advised, and that is the Doomwinds build. So Doomwinds was apparently the most popular legendary in the last patch. I wasn't a shaman back then, so I don't have much first-hand experience with Doomwinds. I did get it set up, and I have done keys with it, so I've done it enough to know that I won't be using it in anytime soon in this expansion. Sorry, in this patch. But I will go over sort of like what the deal is with Doomwinds. Doomwinds is a totally different build. The playstyle is totally different. The gearing is totally different. You basically, in this build, looks like I haven't really updated my Doomwinds build to be the same as my most recent crit gear, but you want crit and haste with Doomwinds. Our mastery buffs abilities that are like effectively spells, like our fire, our ice. Our mastery doesn't buff our physical abilities, and the physical abilities include Storm Strike and Crash Lightning. And the reason that's bad is our Doomwinds legendary. It turns our Wind Fury totem into a cooldown. A cooldown you can't really track yourself. So I have weak auras, of course, to track it, like right here. When you drop this totem for 12 seconds, you will have a 100% chance to trigger Wind Fury attack on people that you hit with your main hand. So that means Crash Lightning and Storm Strike. So this build is not like PLA at all. It's not like our Skybreakers build at all. This isn't consistent damage. This is like burst window, 12 seconds. You got to nail this window, or else you do no damage. Kind of a build. It plays similar in tree wise. So here, I haven't used this in a while, so I'll have to actually spec it out with another person. I'll do it with Nadia. Typically, I would do it with Theotar, but I'll do it with Nadia because I want to save Theotar for my Skybreakers build in case I want to do it again. All the conduits are different with this one. You still run Focused Lightning, but you won't be running Magma Fist, and you won't be running... you will be running Chain Harvest. You will be running Chain Harvest. Yeah, the only other options are Frost Shock, which could be decent in like single target builds, but it's got nothing to do with this build. I guess you can probably justify going with Tilt of the Core here. It will give you more Maelstrom if you want to somehow make this work with like our tier set, but you the thing you need to have is Wind Fury weapon. So apply your conduits, switch over to Nadia. Everyone has experience probably with this tree. I think Thrill Seeker, it stacks up and it gives you a big haste buff, and it gives you a big crit or verse buff, whichever you have more of. I think in our case it should hopefully be crit. The reason that we gear differently in this build is, like I said, crit and haste are at least good for the things that trigger Wind Fury, whereas mastery is not. So I don't run this build very often. I might be a little rusty here. Let me just change my talents over to the Wind Fury talents. You don't care about Lashing Flames or Hot Hand anymore. Instead, you go Forceful Winds and Storm Flurry. These basically just make your Wind Fury attack stronger. And Storm Flurry isn't honestly that great. It gives you something to do. It makes it more likely that you'll have buttons to press that are useful in your Doomwinds window, as opposed to Hot Hands, which doesn't benefit at all with Doomwinds. So you'll be depleted in mastery. Your Lava Lashes will hit like little wet noodles. You probably still go with Fire Nova. It's as good as Hailstorm in terms of like mastery benefit, and it hits more targets. So it depends a little bit on your playstyle, but I would stick with Fire Nova. And these things are always the same for every build. So the build's kind of weird. It doesn't play the same as others. The thing you want to do is somehow you want to get enough. You want to get into this rhythm where you're doing Crash Lightning and then Chain Lightning over and over again. And the reason you want to do that is Crash Lightning hits every target in front of you, um, at any target count too. So this is why people say it has uncapped AoE potential, because every time you hit Crash Lightning, you'll trigger Wind Fury attacks on everything that you hit. So at 5 targets, this probably won't do a lot of damage. So here, let me try it out. I can't drop Wind Fury Totem yet because it'll blow my Doomwinds window. So I can't actually use it, unfortunately. It's an awkward build in that way. But I come in, I just do some filler stuff, trying to bide some time. I want to make sure I do my Chain Harvest first. If I was Theotar, it would be giving me a buff. So I do Dogs, Chain Harvest, IQD, drop, Chain. I'm just doing Chain Lightning and Crash Lightning over and over again. With Sunder as well. And now the window's over. So back out, we can see all the damage came from Wind Fury attack. It's very weird. It feels way better when you're on like a really high haste pull. Like if you had PI with this, you can probably do like Chain Lightning every other global. Whereas you can see me right here, I have to do Chain Lightning, Crash Lightning, Chain Lightning, and then something else to fill the gap. So Crash Lightning, Storm Strike, and then I can't do anything right now. I don't have any Maelstrom. So Crash, Chain, Storm Strike, Crash, Chain, Storm Strike. Then I can do Crash again. Yeah. And Sundering is the only ability that we have besides like our normal rotation abilities that will trigger it. So you have like 3 moves you can use in your window. I find this to be very clunky. In my experiments in the other side, like the damage that I did wasn't that much better than like a PLA build or even a Skybreakers build, just because like if anything ever goes wrong, your damage is gone, and your consistency is gone as well. So the longer a pull goes, the worse your overall will be. Like, and then you have these choices to make constantly. Like, do I drop it or do I hold it? Like, this is only 2 targets. PLA never suffers from those. PLA is always at 100%. Like every pull, you're at 100%. Here, it's not the case. So I'll come in. I'll get a bunch of Maelstrom just so I can do this smoothly. I'll pretend that I'm just coming in from a pack. I have my Doomwinds up again. The only thing I'd say is like this ability over here, Forceful Winds, it stacks up to 5 times. So I track it over here. I want to make sure I have 5 stacks of this thing before I send Sundering. Like, I'm pretty sure that's important, but to be honest, I don't play this enough to know. So I send that out. I do Dogs, Doomwinds, attack, Storm Strike, Crash, Sunder, Crash, Crash, again, Chain again, Crash again, and that was it. That was it. Yeah. So it peaked high. It peaks high, right? It peaks higher than our other builds will go. It's the only thing that gives us a big damage window that we can do, but it demands that we completely gear for it and we sacrifice like all of our other strengths. I think probably this is not going to be played very much this season. Our PLA build is just too good. Skybreakers as like an alternative build is too easy and consistent. This build is like you really got to be pulling very, very big on a 1-minute cadence to justify like doing this, because it's the only thing that can do uncapped AoE. I included it here because I think people like it or miss it, but I would not recommend it myself. The last build I'll go over, which I also don't strongly recommend, but I have played around with it a little bit just as like an experiment. It is like similar to our raid build. It's Witch Doctor's Wolfbones with a slight twist on it for Mythic Plus. I haven't gotten it to be good enough at single target justify what you give up with PLA, but I do like the build. I like the playstyle of Night Fae, and it is like a lot of single target damage. So if your team just had like absolutely crazy single target damage, absolutely crazy AoE damage, but they really lacked single target, maybe you can justify this, but the price you'll pay in overall is very high. I've got another video where I just go deep dive into Witch Doctor Wolfbones on like a DOS, and I show you guys like you know, while I did do much better on bosses, it wasn't so much better that it would justify me losing like 5k overall on DOS. But I will go over it. You can, I mean, you can obviously just use the raid build like that. That works just fine. The important part is that you're wearing Witch Doctor. Now you're Night Fae. So the double Lego for Night Fae will make your Fae transfusion. Basically, every time your Fae transfusion ticks, it'll reduce the cooldown on feral spirits and give you a crit buff. So the trick here is you want to make sure you're actually full channeling your Fae transfusion. I'm in Dreamweaver right now. Well, here, let me go through the talents first. The talents are actually going to be pretty close to the PLA build. I would go Lashing Flames and Hot Hand still. Like with this build, you do run with Mastery. Mastery is still pretty good for this build. Elemental Blast is what you would go in raids, but the only way you can justify going Elemental Blast really is by saying like you literally only care about single target. Like you're losing a lot of damage if you go Elemental Blast and Mythic Plus. Now maybe you just want to hard focus single target and you can do that. I think just be warned. According to the sims I've done, it'll be like a couple of 100 DPS increase max on single target. Like it's not going to bring you from like 13k to 15k, right? It's going to bring you from like 13k to 3300 or something like that. So it's not night and day. Hot Hand, just because we're using Mastery again, so it's nice. Fire Nova, I would advise doing Fire Nova if you're in like any dungeon besides top, I think. Hailstorm you might justify in top because like Hailstorm, it will hit like up to 5 targets if you're using it right. And if you're using Hailstorm, you'll probably also be using the conduit that gives you more Maelstrom. So more Maelstrom is nice because the good thing about this build is like it's the only build that really plays well with our tier set. Like our tier set is pretty bad for Mythic Plus. Like but this build actually does benefit from our tier set, so that's pretty nice. But Fire Nova is just so much AoE damage. So if you're in like a big dungeon, like you're gonna give up a lot of overall by not taking Fire Nova. I'd say Fire Nova. In terms of conduits, I usually do Dreamweaver here. I think all of them have their place. Dreamweaver is kind of trolling this week on Storming because like you're just constantly booped and sanguines everywhere. You can't stand in it. So maybe for weeks like this, go with Karain or Naya. Kind of up to you, whichever you prefer. But I guess the important part is the conduits that you're using are pretty much the same conduits as our PLA build. The only difference is you might go Chill to the Core if you were going Hailstorm. And you would only do that if you were really, really, really wanting to go single target, because you would get more Maelstrom stacks this way, and more Maelstrom stacks means more spending, which means more dogs with our tier set. So this is a reasonable tree you can go with. The downside here is we don't have funnel anymore, obviously, although we do have the major tools for AoE that we were used to from the other builds. So maybe I'll go over the playstyle here is definitely a bit different. Instead of coming in and making sure you have like max flame shocks out for your primordial wave like you would in PLA, you're really focusing on like nailing your cooldown cycles. So this pull is also this build is nice because you actually do have like cooldowns you can use for damage windows, which is kind of cool. So I would come in maybe the first thing you do is like always drop your Wind Fury totem. You can get your flame shocks up. Then you send out your dogs, and then you do transfusion, and then send out your IQD, fire, then you have dogs again, right? This is the cool part. Like, now you've got all these dogs. Like, you've got dogs for days. And now you can just do your normal build that you would do with any other of your covenants, and, make sure you get your your Lashing Flame spread around, which is very awkward in the Night Fae hall because they're so awkwardly spaced. But you can see actually, like, I don't know, like it's a really fun build to play. The only reason it's not great is because like PLA is so strong. So the damage it's doing is like not terrible if you make that compromise to go like mixed between AoE and single target, but just keep in mind though, if you make the compromise, then your single target will end up like approaching what it is with PLA, and then the difference is like, okay, you have a lot more dogs and you have Fey Transfusion to get double dogs out within a couple of seconds of each other, so you can do damage windows better. That's what this build can do that other builds can't do. But like I said, like while I do think this is really, really fun, it has pretty strict requirements around like positioning. Like you can go with these other builds, play around with these a little bit. It's hard to justify doing other builds right now when PLA is just so good. And this build can't do funnel, right? You can do like, single target focus while you happen to have your flame shocks out on other targets, but that's not funnel. It's nothing like the funnel that you can do with PLA, unfortunately. So this build is an option. I'd say this build is more viable than our Doomwinds build. In terms of viability, I'd say it's PLA, Skybreakers. Skybreaker is roughly tied with this, both of them being niche picks for like if you really want to focus on utility and AoE with Skybreakers versus if you want to like tilt the scales a bit more in terms of single target. And I think you can. I mean, no build is like just completely terrible for a shaman right now. Like you really could like, the talents are literally exactly the same as they are with PLA and Necro. So you could just throw on Witch Doctors as Necro if you want as well, and then you would have the big haste buff, which is like a nice thing to have. I feel like this build, I just love how this build jives with CDR with Fey Transfusion. I just like using Wolf Bones with the extra CDR that you get here. Like it feels better to me, but you can get comparable results, I guess, with Necro in this build as well. It's up to you. It's fun. It's not completely trolling. Just make sure you don't go all in single target if you're doing this for like normal keys. If you want to go all in single target, make sure your group has AoE for the pulls where you're not doing AoE. Right, that's the big thing to keep in mind with this pull. So that's it. That's all of the builds. That's all of the play styles. All of the examples I could think of. Feel free to add some questions or point out any things I missed. I'll try to answer some questions in the comments and on the Discord, of course, but hopefully people can use this as a reference for playstyle, rotation, talents, gearing, all that kind of stuff. Good luck in all of your key endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.